Boom. And just like that, we are underway. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Agent Power Huddle and welcome to Scripting Fridays. My name is Ed Laine. I am a broker here in Seattle. I don't know if you can see the Space Needle, but I like to be able to pull a string and say the right words. So that's what we do every Friday is practice that stuff. Today, we're going to talk about spring sellers because it's February, it's late February, and we should already be working on our incoming inventory of listings. So let's dive in, shall we? Here, watch my slides. Come on. All right. So everyone can see that, right? If you're new, again, my name's Ed Lane. I'm in my 39th year in the industry, and I've sold over 3,000 homes. I've also closed over 5,000 mortgages, and I'm a licensed lender. So I do both things, and I help my clients even better because of that. So we can talk more about that later if you'd like. But today is all about getting sellers into action and how to approach them, what to say, how to sort of gracefully enter the conversation about getting their home ready and on the market. So it starts in February. Everyone talks about spring and how inventory goes up in spring, and it does historically every year. Why is that? Well, it's because their homes look prettier, right? They have the tulips are in bloom and the gladiolas are coming in and all blah blah blah. Spring comes to buyers sooner than it comes to sellers. So remember that. And we'll do a deeper dive on that next week. But sellers love how their homes look in the spring, and that's when they want you to take your photos. So we're going to go through some proven methods for dominating the listing inventory before your competing brokers in your market wake up. Does that sound like a plan? All right. Because in the end, those listings that come on the market in April, they're already under listing agreements in February. So we should be talking to folks now. And already I have been, and hopefully you have as well, right? Because sellers, that's, Zillow did a study and they said the average seller is thinking about selling for over 400 days before they put the sign in the yard. So all we're talking about is the 90 days of runway leading up to that event, right? And inventory is still low right now. So it allows you to frame conversations better than it will be if you kick this conversation off in April, right? Hopefully, all of you are seeing your inventories already start to rise. We talk on my team about targeting the third Thursday in January for new listings. And that's because they sell fast in January. It's like a lot of people don't realize that, but that's when inventory starts to climb. So we're going to prepare and we're going to help our clients prepare so that they don't feel like you're being pushy, right? Preparation is better than persuasion. We never want to, push people one direction or another. We want to help them arrive at decisions and choices that benefit them, but include you, right? That's the key. So, what are they thinking at this time of the year? Well, they're debating whether they should wait, right? They're wondering what the market's doing. Is it strong enough? What's my house worth? Like they might go get a Zillow's estimate, but beyond that, they don't even know if that's accurate, right? And what do I need to do to my house in order to get it ready for selling? Well, depending on the length of that list, they might need several weeks, right? I've been in some pretty beat up houses. That list, it's kind of a funny phenomenon. And this is how I explain it to sellers. Your list and the actual list are probably not the same because you know your home inside and out. You probably have a longer list. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you which things we should do that will either help the house sell faster or for more money. And I can guarantee you there's things on your list that do neither of those things. So let's get together, right? What does that dialogue do for a seller? Gives them hope, right? Because they have this list of 18 items and they're like, oh crap, I would love to talk to Ed and see if I can pare that down in half or cut it, even just to 17 would be better than 18, right? So it's an encouraging and hope-filled dialogue that will get you meetings with folks. So keep that one in your holster, right? Where would we even move to, right? I often use the lily pad dialogue, right? Moving from one house to another and only having to move once is key, right? And most consumers dread having to move twice. We all would, right? Moving sucks. So having to move into a temporary housing thing while you go look for a house to then move again is brutal. So you want to master simultaneous closings with non-simultaneous possession dates. If you guys want to make a note, there's a website called downsizingwa.com, which is my funnel. It's a click funnel for downsizers in Washington, but it'll give you some coaching. It'll also give you some ideas on some marketing that you could do for yourself, right? But that whole class is all about that fear to help that consumer who watches it realize that sucks and then realize I'm the solution to avoiding it, right? And you guys are too. All right. Sorry for the tangent. Let's keep going. Whoa, what just happened? I am not playing a video. That's weird. Huh. I must have had a link in my slide deck. Here's the key though, right? You got to reach out. You got to start making connections and helping answer these questions before someone else does.
What we call
What
our
is going on?
EMA tour. And I want to kind of give a little bit of a description because what happens a lot of times is realtors will come with,
That sounds like my voice, doesn't it?
comps, and they'll have a conversation. The problem with
Shut up, Ed. Jeez, man. That's really weird. I don't know. There's a link in there somewhere. All right. That commercial was brought to you by Ed Laine. All right. Come on. So what's the timeline? Like, what's the ideal timeline? January, market cleanup, right? This is how I explain it to consumers. In January, the market gets cleaned up. I'll give you an example. I had a listing that was on in the fall. It didn't sell. We put it back on the market in January and it sold in a week. That's the renewed and rejuvenated market of that happens every January. That's why we target the third January. The last year, 2025 January, I put two on and they both sold for over 200 grand over asking. January is a prime time. So just keep that in the back of your mind. If you go back to the Agent Power Huddle website, you'll find a video where we did a class on how to talk to people in October and November about January. And it's a really good video because it walks through how the short, very, very short version of it is a consumer's going to ask you, is now a good time in the fall, right? And you actually don't want to answer that. You want to know, well, why are you asking, right? And you can't really say that because that sounds like a setup. So what you say instead is, I sell houses in the fourth quarter every year. I also sell them in January. What's your situation? And then they'll say, well, we have to sell before the end of the year. Great. Did you know December is actually my third highest transaction volume month of the year? And they're like, wow, we found the right guy, right? That's why in that conversation, I don't want to say, oh, yeah, it sucks in the fourth quarter. Only desperate sellers are on the market in the fourth quarter, and only opportunistic buyers are on the market in the fourth. No, no, no. You can't say any of that because you don't know if that prospect has to sell, right? You
Less
want to be,
competition in December.
I'm, you're right, Allison. I'm not going deep into that topic. Watch that other video, but you're absolutely right. There's all kinds of positives that you can give the person that needs it. In the end, though, if they don't need it, like one of those two that I mentioned that sold for 200 over, their answer to my question was, we don't really care. It doesn't matter to us. Our house is free and clear. To which I said, well, it'll probably sell for more in January then if you don't mind hanging tight rather than listing it through the holidays. And they said, okay. And we did. And this guy, the husband, I'm sorry for the tangent, but it's interesting. Uh, the husband is a Boeing engineer. You know, Boeing is a big employer here in Seattle. He never said two words to me the whole time. His wife did all the communication. Even if he was in the room, he didn't really, I mean, he looked at me, but he never said anything. And it was kind of weird, right? After it closed, he called me and just said, man, were you right? And I was like, that's the biggest testimonial I could ask for, right? So anyway, back to the spring seller timeline. February is all about planning and preparation. Let's get you in position to succeed, right? March and April is execution. I have another one right now that's their goal is to move after the school year ends. We're doing staging consults now, and I'm giving them advice on repairs and all the stuff, right? That's the March, April execution timeline. We did a training last week on the moving concierge program. So if you don't have the resources or your client doesn't have the resources, watch that video and you can learn how to outsource and get funding for repairs, big ticket repairs. I've done $300,000 remodels using that program, right? So March, April is execution, May, June is closings. Now you can move, right? And a lot of people want to move over the summer. This all tees up nicely. So my question for you guys is where in that timeline do you want to get paid? Right? That means you need to start talking in February. That's the whole premise of today's training, right? I gotta move you guys out of the way. So you start by booking an appointment, right? And frame it as a strategy session, not a listing appointment. And Jeanette, sorry, I'm just reading your comment. Is anyone close to Victorville on this call? I don't know if there is, but I do know that there's an agent collective link that you can search brokers in the agent collective. There's 1,700 of us, and there I'll guarantee you there's somebody that services Victorville in there. So, how do you talk to people, right? Well, you're not going to chase listings. You want to book strategy sessions, and you want to position yourself as the advisor, the planner, the market expert. So what does it sound like? Hey, Joe, I'm not calling to ask you to list. I'm calling to offer you a spring market strategy session so you know your options before everyone else jumps in. Would that benefit you? How does that sound? When's a good time? Pretty straightforward, right? But I start by saying I'm not calling you to list. That puts their defenses down. Pretty easy, right? Hey, when's a good time for us to get together for a strategy session? Think of all the things that you do in that first meeting. You build rapport, obviously, but you also analyze the property, figure out what repairs might be needed, get a sense of their timing and their needs for after. Do you want me to help you find a house too? Right? There's a lot of boxes to tick, and a strategy session makes a heck of a lot more sense than I'm coming to pressure you to sign a listing agreement. Low pressure, increased authority, right?
Ed, quick question, that sounds like it would be a good thing to follow, like sending out CMAs, or would you do that prior?
Great question, Anjanette. And actually, I don't send CMAs until I get hired. And I know there's a lot of experts that say you should give somebody a CMA, twice a year. It's a way to stay top of mind, blah, blah, blah. I do that, but only for people that are already clients of mine when I sold them the house. I don't put out a CMA as a marketing extension to get a new lead or convert a lead because here in Washington, I have a law that says I can't provide brokerage services until I get hired. So I use that as the reason. Here, I want to do all these things I just described to you. This I'm cutting to the end, right? But after this meeting, I go, all these services I just described to you that I'm going to do for you, I can't even start them until you hire me. Senate Bill 5191 states, blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense? And they go, oh, I didn't realize that. Or some people have realized it. They know a new law went into effect, right? And then the one other wrinkle that we use is we have a cancellation agreement. So that allows me for the person who sort of bucks at that, I'll say, by the way, we start with a cancellation agreement so that you know you can fire me at any time. But we have to do the paper shuffle in order for me to legally do these services for you. And they go, oh, okay. Then we sign, I bring the listing agreement with me. I just don't lead with it, right? All right.
One more question on that.
No, go for it.
Um, would you use that same, because I want to get into calling expireds, would you use that same thing? It sounds like a good lead-in for calling expireds too, or would that be, another class you're teaching, but
Yeah, we could do a deep dive on expireds. Um, I'll just answer your question this way though. With an expired, I want to know why they think it didn't sell, and then give them the impression that I have a stable of buyers. Would it be okay for me to come by and see your house? And I always position myself as supportive and a resource. I want you to sell it successfully, right? That comes more into play with FISBOs because they're already on the market. But an expired, I'll just say, hey, I have a stable of buyers. Would it be okay for me to come look at your property so I can figure out who in my database would be a good fit? And they go, okay, I'm actually going to one today that I did that with. So, in the strategy session, like once I book the appointment with that seller in February, I'm going to introduce the three pillars: pricing, presentation, and marketing. That's the core of any listing strategy, right? And pricing is on the list first for a very specific reason, right? How do buyers search for properties? In their phones. And whatever app they're using, the first question that app asks them is what's the min and max price you want to search under, right? So we have to be very cognizant of that. And 90% of marketing success begins with the price. So we actually use an approach called price bracketing on our team, which we can cover. So in pricing, I had a duplicate slide there. We have what we call our right price promise. So We actually have in our seller presentation a slide that says we'll consult an appraiser to get their input, and we're going to use data to give you the best possible advice. And they go, oh, okay. That's a powerful introduction to a process we call the Color Picture CMA Tour. And we've covered that in this training, so you can watch that video. You can also go to my YouTube channel, it's there. But that's a powerful tool that helps retrain the brain of the seller on price, and it causes them to be more realistic. You also want to avoid the pricing traps, right? Well, what's a pricing trap? Pricing a house artificially high so we have room to come down. That's a trap. That actually eliminates visibility for your listing. You don't want to overprice a home. In fact, one of the things I'll say to a seller, I'll say that you're not doing this. So I'm not saying this about you, but that is the least sophisticated negotiating tactic on the planet. And they're like, why do you say that? And I go, because what people that do that don't realize is by pricing your house even just 10% above the value cuts the visibility by 50%. That's a lot of eyeballs, right? Pricing it artificially low in the hopes of getting a bidding war doesn't always work, right? And then price bracketing is the third trap, which is I've got a listing that's $799,999. And I do this visually when I'm talking to a seller. So watch my screen. That house at $799,999, the guy who's searching from 750 to 800 would see it. But the guy who's searching from 800 to 850 would not. And if all we did was raise the price $1, now both audiences would see it and we would double the eyeballs. Does that make sense? And they go, oh. And I'll actually tee that up by saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're obviously thinking of selling your home. That probably means you already started looking, right? And they go, yeah. And I go, have you noticed when you're looking at listings on Redfin or Zillow or wherever that they all end in 900, 950, 995, or 888 to manipulate the Chinese community? And they go, yeah, almost all of them have that. I go, that's evidence that those realtors don't know how to market listings on the internet. That's how I intro the price bracketing conversation where I use my hands. And they think you're brilliant when you do that because nobody really thinks of it, right? We want to position your home. If you think of it like this, I'll talk to you like you're a seller. Think of it like this. And I have a slide in my slide deck that's on the screen while I'm saying these things. Think of it like this. We want to find that perfect spot where we are priced as high as we can be while still having the largest audience we can get, right? That's the perfect scenario because that increases the likelihood of success. And they go, oh, okay. Then later, we'll play the color picture CMA tour process, and I can invoke that conversation and bring it into the present and say, remember, we were talking about that, trying to find that balance. Well, now we know what the landscape looks like. Your house should be priced for X, right? Pricing isn't about optimism, it's about strategy. Another dialogue I'll use is I'm going to give you three numbers: your home's market value, the proper list price strategy, and what it's ultimately going to sell for. There's another video on the longer versions of those three things. Thank you, Autumn, for putting the link in the chat for Victorville. All right. Presentation. First impressions sell, right? First impressions matter. Professional photography matters. 97% of buyers start online. That study is like 15 years old. I think it's 100% now. Don't you? That's critical. We give in our seller folder a 75-point checklist, which is all about preparation for getting the photos done, but also preparation for the showings. It's a guide. It helps them. And they appreciate it, right? We're going to give the pre-listing consult because before we ever launch, we want to make sure your home looks better online than the competition. We're also going to point out things that would cause a buyer to ask for a discount, right? Here's another, I'm going to stop my share so I can look at you guys. Here's another dialogue I use a lot. When a buyer comes to your home for a showing, they're going to have the list price in their head, right? Because they saw it on Zillow or wherever, and they saw it $799, $999, or whatever. And then they're going to walk through your house. And if they see little flaws, they're going to think discount, discount, discount. So our mission before we ever put it on the market is going to be to eliminate as many of those as we can, right? The other dialogue that works really well is repairs for your home will fall into one of three categories. The thing I just covered is the first category. First category is little things that will add to the risk of a buyer wanting a discount or lending issues, right? Because we don't want to eliminate finance buyers. So let me say that better because I was coming off that other idea. Group number one is lending or safety issues, things that would prevent a buyer from being able to finance your home. We got to do those things, right? Group number two are things that would cause a buyer to ask for a discount and also make your house sell faster, but not necessarily for more money. Although I would argue, and I say it just like this to my sellers, although I would argue if your home sells in the first week or two, it's going to sell for more than if it sold in a month or two, right? The further down the line, the bigger the discount the buyer's going to ask for. So that second group is pretty important. The third group is what I would call speculative, right? So that's, should we update this or upgrade that? And if we do, is it going to sell for more money? So that's up for the seller to decide, but you can also introduce your moving concierge program, which we touched on last week, if you want to. That's what I would call a speculative, right? That third group. So as we're having this initial February strategy session, these are the conversations you got to have, right? Because you need to know, does the seller have resources? Is their house in disrepair? The one I mentioned earlier that we're working on right now and having a staging consult right now, his exact words were, I want you to tell me what I need to do to get it to sell faster, but I don't want to spend $200,000. I'm not interested in upgrades. And I hadn't even given him my dialogue yet. It was like he stole a page out of my coaching book. It was funny. Aggressive marketing. So we have a property launch system, multi-website exposure, social media marketing, and we have a buyers in waiting database. You should too. If you do any kind of lead generation, you can frame that as we have buyers in waiting. And our listings sell faster because we push your house through that database and get it in front of the people that are looking in your area and your price point. Does that make sense? We also use countdown timers in our marketing. That is straight out of Cialdini's book on sales. If you guys have never read Cialdini, I recommend you do. But he says there's 5 things that will cause someone to take action and buy. Scarcity is one of them. That's what countdown timers do, right? You guys have all seen it. Act fast, only 3 spots left or whatever, right? We are all about the eyeballs, right? Exposure creates competition. Competition creates leverage. The more eyeballs, the more money. Another formula that makes perfect sense is the more exposure I can get you online will create more showings. More showings relates to more offers relates to more money, right? They're all connected. I'm going to go a little faster because we're at the bottom of the hour, but this is probably the most important thing, communication. You have to keep your client updated. You have to have a strategy of weekly updates so you can let them know what's going on, even if nothing has happened, right? We also use a feedback system. You probably have the same thing. If you use showing time in your MLS, you can launch automatically questions to the showing agents and then call behind it if they don't answer. If you run a team, that's another benefit to the seller because no lead will fall through the cracks, right? I make weekly phone calls on Fridays to my sellers to give them the update. When I'm setting the expectation, I say, you're going to hear from me every week, whether there's activity or not. Silence creates stress, communication builds confidence. That's what I want you to have and enjoy. And remember, spring inventory is built in February. So if you control the preparation phase, you're going to control the income phase, right? So get on their team. Boom, just like that. How many of you have used whatwouldEdSay.com? I encourage you to try it. Right? Allison has done it a few times. Allison actually texts me with the responses sometimes. It's awesome. Anjanette, so would you have sellers do pest inspections and do section 1 and 2 things? I live in Seattle, Anjanette. We don't have termites. So pest inspections are not, it's not that we don't ever have them. It's just not an automatic thing like it is in some markets. So if a home inspection shows evidence of, we do get carpenter ants, but not even near the frequency that some areas have termites. Um, that's when we'll go to the trouble of a pest inspection. So home inspection, yes. In fact, for you, those of you that are interested, I'll give you the dialogue I used to do on home inspections. I'll tell you what I say today. What I used to say is, no way. Don't do a home inspection. Let the buyer do their own. Because you get 10 inspections, you could get 10 different results. Even though inspectors in Washington state are licensed, that doesn't guarantee you're going to get the same list out of every inspector. Then we had 2020, 2021, the white hot market. So my dialogue pivoted to, we should do an inspection because that'll bring more buyers to the table, right? Buyers are doing pre-inspections and losing and then having to do another one. And it's 400 to 500 bucks a pop. So they're getting tired of wasting money like that. So if we do a pre-inspection, that will bring more buyers to our house because they know they don't have to get one. They get the information, they trust the information. Now we're in a little bit different market. And I say a little bit because here in Seattle, we've actually started to see multiple offers again, but only in specific price bands and areas. But how would I talk about an inspection now? I leave it up to the seller. But I do frame it. I go, because a lot of sellers will ask me, should I do a pre-inspection? And I'll say, there's pros and cons to it. Uh, if I think their house is going to be priced where we might get multiple offers, might have a review date or whatever, then I'll encourage them to do it. But I always pre-frame it like this. I go, if we do it, I want you to have this mentality about it. Once we get the results, you want to plan to fix everything on that list. Now, if the roof is failing, I don't expect you to stroke a check for $40,000, but we need to know if it is because that could affect the pricing, it could affect the negotiations, right? But absent of the catastrophic type issue, we should fix all the little stuff, right? So if you're not willing to have that mentality, we shouldn't do it. Let's let the buyer do it, right? But as long as you're good with that, it's smart because then we can put the report out to the market and mark it up, or my inspector will actually revise it when we show him that we fixed stuff and he'll delete stuff off. Either way, you're communicating this was addressed or now it's gone out of the report, right? So as long as your seller's on board with that approach, it's worth doing. Otherwise, don't bother. Right? Let the game come to you is a sentence I say a lot to people depending on the circumstance. So good question. Let me check the chat to see if there's any others. Seller inspection helps pricing too. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's all about knowledge, right? The more we know, the more accurate we can be. And but I want that seller to really have the posture of when we get that list, I'm prepared to do what's on the list unless it's huge or really expensive, right? Another dialogue that works really well is because sometimes you get a seller that's like, what are you talking about? My house is perfect. Does anyone have that? I have, right? And this is what I say. Your house is awesome. Perfect, I'm not so sure though. I've been doing this a long time. I've seen over 1,000 inspections. Not a single one of them was blank. Every house ever has had something. So is yours going to have something? Probably, right? I'll even if they're just like, I don't care what you're saying, Ed, it's not true. I'll go, look, man, my house, this is a true story. My house is the builder's model home. So it has all the upgrades. It's decked out. It's got crown molding, and most of the houses don't. I mean, it's got all this stuff, right? Because it's his show house. Do you guys know how homes are built? When a plumber does all the plumbing, to test the plumbing for leaks, do you guys know how they test it? They put a cap on it and they pressurize it with air. And as long as there's no air leaking, they know that all the joints are good. In the house I'm sitting in right now, in my case, the plumbing subcontractor, instead of using pliers and pulling the cap out, he used a screwdriver and he jammed the cap into the pipe. Flagrant negligence, ignorance, asshole move, right? On a really nice, expensive house. Guess what happened the first Christmas in my new house? I wanted my whole family to come to Seattle and enjoy Christmas with us. That toilet got a lot of use. It overflowed because it was partially blocked not on Christmas Day, but during the Christmas holiday. Can you believe that? So I don't say it as graphically to the seller, but I do say, even a supposed perfect brand new house can have issues. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wear and tear either. It could be negligence. Let me tell you a quick story. And they're like, oh. So all I'm doing is inoculating them to, we're going to get a list. Hopefully it's short, but there's going to be a list and we'll just have to, yeah, exactly, Allison. We've run a little bit long. I apologize. Hopefully it was worthwhile. Hopefully you guys get on the phone this afternoon and start calling people and saying, hey, if you're even thinking about it, it'd be smart to get an early spring strategy session going just so that you can know what to work on while you got time, right? It's a great posture and it'll help you land listings. If you're here next week, I want to hear how many calls you made and how many sessions you booked. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a great Friday, and I will see you next week.
If you'd like more information or to get connected to the Agent Power Huddle, join our free Facebook group. This call was designed for the agents in our EXP organization, but open to any agent from any brokerage. If you're a guest and you're interested in learning more about EXP or our specific resources within the Agent Collective, reach out to the person who invited you to this call to get more info. Produced by the Agent Collective Media Network.